Rebecca almost threw away the answer she had been begging God to give her. It was inside an old cardboard box at the back of her closet. A box she had not opened in years, a box covered in dust, forgotten behind winter coats, old picture frames, and the kind of memories people keep because they are too painful to face and too precious to discard. That Saturday morning, Rebecca was not looking for anything spiritual. She was not trying to have a moment with God. She was not expecting a sign. In fact, if she had been honest, she was tired of looking for signs, tired of praying and waiting, tired of telling people, "I'm trusting God," while secretly wondering if God was listening at all. She had spent years asking for an answer, years whispering the same prayers, years opening her Bible and feeling nothing, years sitting in church with a smile on her face while something inside her slowly grew quiet. And now, standing alone in her bedroom with trash bags around her feet, Rebecca held that old box in both hands and almost carried it straight to the door. But then the bottom of the box gave way. Books, letters, faded photographs, and a worn leather Bible spilled across the floor. Rebecca froze. She recognized the Bible immediately. It had belonged to her mother. For a moment, she could not move. The room was silent. The dust floated in the pale morning light. And there, lying open on the floor, was a page marked with handwriting she had not seen in years. Her mother's handwriting. Rebecca knelt down slowly. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the Bible. And when she read the words written in the margin, the tears came before she could stop them. Because the sentence on that page was not just a memory. It was the answer she thought heaven had refused to give. Rebecca was 34 years old, and to most people, she looked strong. She was the kind of woman others trusted with their pain. At church, she greeted people with warmth. She helped organize small groups. She remembered birthdays. She prayed for people after service. She knew how to say the right thing when someone else was hurting. God is faithful. Keep trusting. He is working even when we can't see it. And she believed those words. At least she used to. But over the past few years, those same words had become harder to say without feeling like a stranger to her own faith. Rebecca had been praying for direction, not for luxury, not for attention, not for some selfish dream. She had prayed for clarity about her life, her future, her calling, and a door that had seemed almost open so many times only to close again. She had watched friends move forward, marriages restored, careers change, families grow, prayers answered, testimonies shared. And every time someone stood at church and said, "God came through at the perfect time," Rebecca clapped with everyone else. But inside, a quiet question formed. When will it be my turn? She hated that question. It made her feel ungrateful. It made her feel ashamed. Because Rebecca knew God was not a machine. She knew faith was not a transaction. She knew prayer was not supposed to be a way of controlling heaven. But knowing the right theology did not always silence the ache. There were nights when she sat on the edge of her bed, Bible open in her lap, unable to read. She would stare at the pages and whisper, "Lord, I don't even know what else to say." And sometimes that was the whole prayer. Not because she had stopped believing, but because she was tired, tired in a place sleep could not reach. Her mother, Grace, had been the one who taught her to pray. Grace was not a loud woman. She was gentle, steady, and deeply rooted. She did not make faith seem dramatic. She made it seem real. When Rebecca was a little girl, she would often wake up and find her mother sitting by the kitchen window before sunrise, Bible open, hands folded, whispering prayers over the people she loved. Rebecca used to think her mother had a direct line to heaven. But Grace had been gone for almost 7 years now, and lately, Rebecca missed her in a way that felt fresh again. She missed her voice, her wisdom, her quiet confidence. She missed having someone who could look at her and say, "You don't have to pretend with me. because that was what Rebecca had become very good at, pretending. Every Sunday, Rebecca arrived early at church. She dressed nicely. She put on light makeup. She carried her Bible. She hugged people. She smiled when asked how she was. "I'm good." That was her answer. Always. "I'm good." But there is a kind of exhaustion that learns how to smile. A kind of disappointment that knows how to worship with lifted hands while the heart feels heavy. A kind of spiritual dryness that no one notices because the person still shows up. And Rebecca still showed up. That was part of the problem, because people assumed showing up meant she was okay. One Wednesday night after Bible study, an older woman named Margaret touched Rebecca's arm and said, "You have such a strong faith, dear." Rebecca smiled. "Thank you." But in the parking lot, sitting alone in her car, she gripped the steering wheel and whispered, "Lord, if my faith is so strong, why does it feel like it's barely breathing?" Rain tapped softly against the windshield. The church lights glowed behind her. People walked to their cars, laughing, talking, making dinner plans. Rebecca watched them through the glass and felt strangely far away. She was surrounded by believers, but lonely in her waiting. That night she drove home in silence. No music, no sermon podcast, no worship playlist, just the sound of rain and tires on wet pavement. When she got inside, she placed her Bible on the kitchen table and stood there looking at it. She wanted to pray. She wanted to feel something. She wanted to be the woman she used to be. But instead she whispered, "I don't think I can keep doing this." The words frightened her, not because they were dramatic, but because they were honest. For the first time, Rebecca wondered if she was not just tired of waiting. Maybe she was tired of hoping, and that scared her more than the silence. The first revelation came through a closed door. For months, Rebecca had been praying about an opportunity, a position at a non-profit ministry that seemed perfect for her. It combined everything she cared about: faith, counseling, women's support, and community outreach. When she first heard about it, something in her heart came alive. She prayed. She applied. She interviewed. The director seemed impressed. Friends told her it sounded like God was opening the door. Even Rebecca allowed herself to believe it. For the first time in a long while, she felt movement. Then the email came. "Thank you for your time, but we have chosen another candidate." Rebecca read the message 3 times. Then she closed the laptop gently, as if moving too quickly might make the pain worse. She did not cry right away. At first, she just felt numb. Then embarrassed, then angry, not loud anger, not rebellion, a quiet anger that sat beneath the surface and asked questions she was afraid to say out loud. Why would you let me hope again? Why open my heart just to close the door? Why does everyone else seem to hear you clearly? That night she did not open her Bible. The next morning she did not pray. She told herself she would later, but later became tomorrow. Tomorrow became another week, and prayer became shorter, then colder, then rare. Rebecca still spoke to God in public, but privately she had begun to withdraw. It is possible to serve God outwardly while hiding from him inwardly, and Rebecca was learning how. At church she remained faithful. At home she was becoming silent, not because she no longer loved God, but because she did not know what to do with the disappointment. The second revelation came through Margaret. One Sunday after service, Margaret asked Rebecca to stay for a moment. They sat in the empty sanctuary while volunteers stacked chairs in the fellowship hall nearby. The room was quiet, with sunlight falling through the windows in long golden lines. Margaret looked at Rebecca carefully. "You're tired." Rebecca forced a small laugh. "Aren't we all?" Margaret did not laugh. "I don't mean your body." Rebecca looked away. For a moment she considered giving the usual answer. "I'm fine." But the words would not come. Margaret waited. Rebecca's eyes filled slowly. "I don't understand God right now." There it was. Not polished, not spiritual, not safe, just honest. Margaret nodded gently. "Sometimes that is the beginning of a deeper prayer." Rebecca shook her head. "I don't even know if I want to pray anymore." The admission sounded terrible once spoken, but Margaret did not look shocked. She only said, "Then let God meet you there." Rebecca wiped her cheek. "I feel like heaven is silent." Margaret looked toward the front of the sanctuary. Silence is not always absence. Rebecca had heard that before, but this time the sentence stayed with her, not because it fixed anything, it did not, but because it sounded like something her mother might have said. When Rebecca got home, she opened a drawer in her nightstand looking for an old photograph of Grace. She did not find it. Instead, she found a key, small, brass, unlabeled. For several minutes she could not remember what it opened. Then it came back to her. The storage closet. The one she had avoided cleaning for years. The one full of boxes from her mother's house. Rebecca held the key in her palm. And for reasons she could not fully explain, she decided that the next Saturday she would finally open the closet. She did not know it then, but the answer she had been begging for was waiting behind a door she had been avoiding. Saturday came quietly. The sky was grey. The house felt still. Rebecca made coffee, put on old clothes, and stood in front of the storage closet with the brass key in her hand. She almost changed her mind. Some grief does not disappear. It waits in boxes. It hides inside old sweaters, birthday cards, handwritten recipes, and photographs where people are still alive. But Rebecca opened the door. Inside were plastic bins, cardboard boxes, framed pictures, and bags she had not touched in years. For hours she sorted through her mother's things. A scarf that still carried a faint trace of perfume, a recipe card for lemon cake, a photograph of Grace laughing at a church picnic, a birthday card Rebecca had given her when she was 12. Each item felt like a hand pressing against her chest. By the afternoon, Rebecca was overwhelmed. She was tired. Dust covered her sleeves, her eyes burned, and the ache she had been managing for years rose to the surface. She sat on the floor surrounded by boxes and finally said what she had been holding back. "God, I don't understand you." The house was silent. She looked toward the ceiling, almost ashamed of her own words. "I have tried, I have waited, I have served, I have smiled, I have told everyone you are faithful, but I feel forgotten." Tears began to fall. "I know I'm not supposed to say that. I know I'm supposed to be stronger, but I feel forgotten." No thunder, no voice, no instant answer. Just silence. Rebecca wiped her face, frustrated with herself. Then she grabbed an old cardboard box from the back of the closet. It was soft from age, the tape barely holding. She did not remember what was inside. She looked at it and whispered, "I can't do this anymore." She stood, lifted the box, and started toward the trash bags near the door. Then the bottom broke. Everything spilled across the floor. Books, letters, photographs, and a worn leather Bible. Rebecca stared at it. Her breath caught. She knew that Bible. Her mother had carried it for years, to church, to hospital rooms, to kitchen tables, to every season of life. Rebecca knelt down slowly, as if approaching something sacred. The Bible had fallen open, and in the margin, written in blue ink, were the words, "Wait does not mean forgotten." Rebecca covered her mouth. The room blurred, and for the first time in months, she did not feel nothing. She felt seen. Rebecca picked up the Bible with both hands. The pages were worn thin, some corners were folded, certain verses were underlined. There were notes everywhere. Grace had always written in her Bible, short prayers, names, dates, questions, thanksgiving, tiny records of a life lived in conversation with God. Rebecca turned the pages carefully. She found her own name more than once. Rebecca. Give her courage. Rebecca, teach her to trust your timing. Rebecca, protect her heart from bitterness. Each note felt like a voice reaching across years. Then she found a date. It was written almost 10 years earlier, long before the closed door, long before the ministry rejection, long before the current season of silence. The note was beside Habakkuk 2:3. Grace had written, "Lord, when my daughter waits longer than she expected, teach her that delay is not denial." Rebecca pressed the Bible against her chest. Something inside her trembled. She turned another page, Isaiah 55, another note. Your ways are higher. Help Rebecca trust what she cannot trace. Rebecca began to cry harder now, not because all her questions disappeared, they did not, but because she realized something that humbled her. While she was accusing heaven of silence, God had already planted reminders before she knew she would need them. Through her mother's prayers, through ink on old pages, through a Bible she almost threw away. Then Rebecca found one final note. It was written on a small folded paper tucked inside the back cover. Her name was on it. Rebecca! Her hands shook as she opened it. The note said, "My sweet girl, if you ever come to a season where God feels silent, do not confuse silence with abandonment. Some of his deepest work happens where no one can see it. Keep your heart soft. Keep bringing him the truth. Even when your prayers are weak, he is not weak. Even when you cannot hold on tightly, he is holding you." Rebecca lowered the letter. The room was quiet. But now the silence felt different. It no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like mercy. Rebecca whispered, "Lord, I thought you forgot me." Then, after a long pause, she said, "But maybe you were preparing me before I even knew I would need it." Rebecca's story reveals a truth many believers struggle to accept. God's silence does not always mean God's absence. Sometimes the silence we fear is the place where God is doing work too deep for immediate explanation. Habakkuk 2:3 speaks of a vision that waits for its appointed time. Though it seems slow, the instruction is still to wait. That kind of waiting is not passive. It is not pretending pain does not exist. It is not forcing a smile and denying disappointment. Biblical waiting is a holy tension. It is the place where faith is tested, purified, and deepened. Rebecca thought she was waiting only for an answer, but God was also working on the heart that wanted the answer. Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us that God's thoughts and ways are higher than ours. That does not mean our pain is small. It means our view is limited. We see the closed door. God sees what the door would have cost. We see the delay. God sees the formation. We see silence. God may be arranging comfort in places we have not yet opened. Romans 8:28 does not say every situation feels good. It says God works in all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. The good is not always immediate relief. Sometimes the good is deeper trust, a softer heart, a purified motive, a faith that no longer depends only on quick answers. Rebecca's unanswered prayer was not meaningless. The closed door was not random. The silence was not empty. God had been present in ways she could not recognize at the time, through Margaret's gentle wisdom, through an old key, through a closet she avoided, through a box that broke open, through her mother's Bible, through prayers written before the pain arrived. Sometimes God's answer does not come as a loud miracle. Sometimes it comes as a quiet reminder. I was there before you knew you would need me. That evening, Rebecca placed her mother's Bible on the kitchen table, the same table where she had so many times sat in silence, unable to pray. But this time, she did not sit there to demand an explanation. She sat there to return. The house was dim. Rain touched the windows. A small lamp glowed in the corner of the room. Rebecca opened the Bible to Habakkuk and placed the folded note beside it. For a long time, she said nothing. Then slowly, honestly, she began, "Lord, I'm still tired. Her voice broke. "I still don't understand why some doors closed. I still don't understand why it took so long. I still don't know what you are doing," she paused, "but I don't want my disappointment to become distance." The words came from somewhere deep, not polished, not impressive, but real. "I have been angry. I have been afraid. I have smiled when I was breaking. I have told people I was fine when I was not. And I think I wanted your answer more than I wanted your presence." That sentence surprised her, because it was true. For so long, Rebecca had believed her greatest problem was that God was not answering. But now she saw something deeper. She had wanted God to prove his love by giving her the outcome she imagined, and when he did not, she began to question the love. Rebecca bowed her head. "I'm sorry." The apology was not dramatic. It was quiet, but it was sincere. She reached for a blank notebook and wrote one sentence on the first page. "Today, I do not understand everything, but I choose to trust again." Then she looked at her mother's Bible. She thought about Grace praying years earlier, a mother asking God to hold her daughter through a season she would never live to see. A daughter finding those prayers when her faith was almost gone. It was not the answer Rebecca had expected, but it was the comfort she needed. The next Sunday, Rebecca returned to church. She did not feel suddenly fixed. She did not walk in with a perfect smile, but she walked in honestly. After service, Margaret found her near the back row. Rebecca hugged her and whispered, "I think I'm learning that silence is not always empty." Margaret smiled softly. "No, dear. Sometimes silence is where roots grow." Rebecca looked toward the front of the sanctuary. For the first time in a long time, she did not feel like she had to pretend. She was still waiting, but she was no longer waiting alone. Rebecca's circumstances did not change overnight. The job did not suddenly call back. The questions did not all disappear. The future did not become perfectly clear. But something in her heart shifted. She began praying again. At first the prayers were small. Some mornings, all she could say was, "Lord, help me trust you today." Other days, she simply opened her Bible and sat in silence. But now the silence no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a room where God could meet her without pressure to perform. She kept her mother's Bible on the kitchen table, not as a decoration, as a reminder that God can prepare comfort before pain arrives, a reminder that prayers do not expire, a reminder that what looks forgotten may still be held in the hands of God. Over time, Rebecca began to serve differently too, less from the need to look strong, more from a place of honesty. When women at church told her they were tired, she no longer rushed to give perfect answers. She listened. She sat with them. She told them, "You do not have to pretend with God." Because she had learned that faith is not the absence of questions. Faith is bringing the questions to the one who remains faithful. Maybe you know what Rebecca felt. Maybe you have prayed for something so long that the prayer itself began to hurt. Maybe you have watched other people receive answers while your situation stayed the same. Maybe you still show up, still smile, still serve, but inside you wonder if heaven has gone quiet. This story is not saying waiting is easy. It is not saying disappointment does not matter. It is not saying every closed door will make sense quickly. But it is saying this: do not mistake silence for abandonment. God may be working in ways you cannot see. He may be protecting what you would have chosen. He may be preparing what you are not ready to carry. He may be healing something deeper than the situation you keep asking him to change. And he may have already placed reminders of his faithfulness in places you have not opened yet. Rebecca thought God had stopped speaking, but the truth was quieter and more beautiful than she imagined. He had been preparing comfort through prayers written years before, through a mother's faith, through scripture marked with tears, through a box that broke open at just the right moment. Sometimes the answer does not arrive when we demand it. Sometimes the answer waits until our heart is ready to receive it. And maybe the silence you fear is not the absence of God. Maybe it is the hidden room where He is teaching your roots to grow deeper. If this story spoke to your heart, write the word trust in the comments. Let it be a simple reminder that even when you do not understand the silence, you can still trust the one who never leaves. If this video helped you reflect, leave a like and subscribe for more Christian stories about faith, waiting, healing, and new beginnings. And remember, God may be silent for a season, but He is never absent from the heart that still reaches for Him.